I just came across the craziest piece of data that I've seen in a long time. These are a bunch of anonymized SaaS companies classified by their size. And this is their median growth. Take a look at this bar, for example. These are all seed stage companies. But in order to raise capital, they need to be growing at like 3 times the rate that they're currently growing. Take a look at a business like this one. This is a company that's generating millions of dollars in annual revenue, and it's still just growing at 3% month over month. If you put these companies in front of a venture capital investor, they're gonna call them mediocre, or at least not fundable. But this is the reality of thousands and thousands of companies. These are exciting companies that may be profitable, that may be growing fast, that have exciting products and businesses, good economics, but they're still not venture backable, because venture capital is reserved for a privileged few, for extremely fast growing businesses, effectively the top 10% of companies that are growing the fastest. So are the rest of the companies shit? Obviously, no. These just aren't the sexy company that will get covered on a TechCrunch article. They aren't lifestyle businesses. I actually hate that term. They're just startups that nobody talks about, that happen to be the majority of the companies. And today I want to look into their very anonymous statistics. So let's start with some stats to make sense of this fundraising landscape. Globally, around 35,000 funding rounds were closed last year. 20,000 or so of those rounds were angel or seed rounds. And while the number of angel seed rounds decreased with the pandemic, the number of VC rounds grew. But more importantly, the size of the rounds skyrocketed. More than $600 billion were raised in 2021, which is twice as much as what companies raised in 2020. But like I was saying, this is very much a select club. In the US alone, over 5 million new business registrations happened in 2021, but only 4,500 or so early stage companies raised any venture capital. That is 0.08% of all the companies, because so many companies are just not venture backable. This is actually one of the reasons why we decided to pivot our product into something that any startup, not just venture-backed companies, would find useful. So again, with that context, here are some of the stats that shows the reality of all these SaaS companies. Data courtesy of our friends from Churn Mogul. So first, on growth, we can tie the bands that we use to classify these companies so that they more or less correspond to founding rounds. According to Elizabeth Yin, she's a GP at the Hustle Fund, and she was one of our mentors at 500 startups. If you're not growing at 30% month over month, you shouldn't even be thinking about pitching investors or raising capital. Take a look at the median company at this stage. They're just growing at 3.3%. And that, of course, slows down as revenue grows, because growing, say, 2% per month when you have $250,000 in MRR is a lot harder. That's like adding around $6,000 in subscriptions every month. But here's the annualized version of that growth. Again, while not an investor favorite, building a startup with $250,000 or $500,000 in monthly subscriptions and then continuing to grow at 30% every year is a very exciting company. That is the median. So half of the surveyed companies are growing faster and half are growing slower. Now, if we zoom into that information, we can start looking at the percentiles or the brackets of growth. So the median is still there, but now we can look at the 75th percentile, or in other words, the top 25% of faster growing companies. So this is still looking at annualized growth. And just like we concluded before, even that select 75th percentile of companies is not reaching that 3x year-on-year growth that venture capital investors are looking for. If you look at the 95th percentile, or the top 5% of fastest growing companies, they are growing at 10% a month on a seed stage, at 7% a month for Series A, and they are staying well above 5% through their journey to $1 million in MRR. What I was really excited to dig into was the drivers of this growth. For example, if we split the companies by ARPA is average revenue per account or average revenue per user, the guys from Churn Mogul found that the median monthly growth tends to be faster the more expensive the product is. So the top 25% group across all ARPA bands stands well above 6% of monthly growth. And I think that seems at least indirectly correlated to the churn rate. The median churn rate drops a lot as the product gets more expensive, which makes sense. More expensive products are bound to be harder to sell, which means they need to have more hands-on, more assistance and onboarding, and their customers are less likely to cancel. Cheaper products are also more likely to be B2C focused, or at the very least self-service, versus the more expensive enterprise type of products. And if we go even one step deeper in this nerdiness, we can look at net churn, which also accounts for expansion and reactivation revenue. That is when the same cohort, the same group of customers upgrades to a more expensive tier plan. So instead of dropping their MRR, it increases. So that causes negative net churn. And this is, of course, what we call the SaaS nirvana, negative churn. It's a feat that companies in the lower pricing tiers can only dream of achieving, but that for B2B and for enterprise products, it looks like the norm. So we SaaS founders, we tend to live in little bunkers of our own data. I'm usually pretty open about exchanging information with other founders that I know, but some of this data is sensitive. We can't just publish it online, like a lot of the stuff that we publish online. But having a chance to look at a report like this anonymized was really like data porn for me. See you guys next week.